Good morning, guys. We are going to dive into our first novel today, and it's called We Are Not From Here. It's by Jenny Torres Sanchez. I wanted to walk you through the prologue and get started in chapter 1. So I'm going to read to you, and then as I'm reading, I'm going to be taking some notes over here. Feel free to take notes as you would like to. If you take your notes in a different way, that's totally fine. There's just a few things that I was going to point out to you as we read. So we're going to start with the prologue. It's on this left-hand side of the page. When you live in a place like this, you're always planning your escape. Even if you don't know when you'll go. Even if you stare out your kitchen window looking for reasons to stay. You stare at the red Coca-Cola sign on the faded turquoise wall of Don Felicio's store that serves the coldest Coca-Colas you've ever tasted. The gauzy orange of the earth, both on the ground and swirling in the air, that has seeped into every one of your happiest memories. The green palms of the tree you climbed one time to pick and crack the ripest coconut that held the sweetest water you gave your mother. And the deep blue of the sky you tell yourself is only this blue here. You can look at all this and still be planning your escape, because you've also seen how blood turns brown as it seeps into concrete, as it mixes with dirt and the excrements and innards of leaking dead bodies. You've stared at those dark places with your friends on the way to school, the places people have died, the places they disappeared from, the places they reappeared one morning months later, sometimes alive, sometimes dead, but mostly in fragments. You've watched dogs piss in those places, on those bodies that once cried with life. You plan your escape because no matter how much color there is or how much color you make yourself see, you've watched every beautiful thing disappear from here, made murky by night and darkness and shadow. You plan your escape because you've seen your world turn black. You plan your escape, but you're never really ready to go. Wow. All right, so the first thing that I noticed definitely is the concept of escape. We know that something that's repeated over and over in a piece that really helps to create a symbol is known as a motif. So that's something we really want to concentrate on as the story progresses. Something else that I'm also noticing is color. And as we read, I want you to think about how color, and I mean, if you look back through here, you can see so many different colors. You have red, you have blue, and then you also have the idea of kind of combining colors or making them murky. If you've ever just been playing around in different colors of paint, you know that each color starts out vibrant and pretty, but then if you swirl them all together, you inevitably get the color brown. And it's not necessarily a bright, vibrant shade that everybody wants to use. So I want you to think about not just color, but mixing the colors. The writer talks about making them murky. We know that in the very end, she says that the world turns black. So kind of like the absence, not just the absence of color, but the absence of light as well. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of symbol here in the colors that we need to pay attention to. All right, this is part 1, Mi tierra, mi land. Volga. Mama tells me I have an artist heart. She told me this ever since I can remember, usually out of nowhere. I'll feel her gaze on me and I'll look over at her and she'll say, "You have an artist heart, Volga." I didn't know what she meant when I was younger, but I didn't care because she always smiled with this kind of smile that was happy and proud and sad all at the same time. And it made me feel like this thing, this artist heart she was talking about, was something big. When she first said this, I pictured myself with a little mustache and beret like Tom and Jerry wear in the cartoons when they whip up a masterpiece and, no kidding, 5 seconds flat before they're chased by each other or that bulldog or a broom. 5 seconds. That kind of illusion probably isn't good for little kids, but then again, getting chased is life, right? So maybe those cartoons did teach me something. Anyway, the truth is that's not the kind of artist I want to be. I want to be the kind of artist my father was, a musician who made cool-ass music and dreamed big dreams. Maybe that's what having an artist heart means, dreaming. Or maybe it means seeing color in the world, noticing and searching for it everywhere and everything, because the world can be such a dark place. Or maybe it means you feel things you wish you didn't. Maybe it means that when you see blood on concrete, you can't stop wondering who it belonged to. Maybe it means a part of you wants to cry and run. All I know is an artist's heart is the worst kind of thing to have around here. An artist's heart doesn't help you survive. It makes you soft, breaks you from the inside out, little by little. I don't want to be broken. I don't want to be in pieces. There's too much of that around us already. What I need is a heart of steel, a heart that is cold and hard and numb to the thorny pricks of pain, the slashes of tragedy. Chico flicks something at my face, and I shoot a tiny piece of tortilla back at him, straight into his eye. He rubs at it and laughs. He's sitting across the table from me, wearing his stupid powder blue shirt again. And we hear Mama's cell phone ring. Man, don't you have any other shirts? That tiny thing barely fits you. You look like a damn belly dancer or something. I laugh, pointing at the visible fleshy rolls around his middle. Shut the hell up, man. It's my favorite one, okay? He says. You see what it says here? American Eagle. Okay? I'm an American Eagle, so go have yourself, he adds quietly. He looks over at me, waiting to see my reaction. No, not like that, man. Remember what I told you? You got to put some force behind your words, stick out your chin, lunge forward a little like a dog being held back by a chain. I demonstrate. But Chico shrugs and pulls at his shirt. I've tried to teach Chico how to curse and insult properly, especially since he has the sides to pull off the whole threatening thing. But Chico is too timid when he curses. Chico is too timid with everything. He broadcasts his weakness to the world without meaning to. Like, even now. He pulls at his shirt subconsciously across his round belly, so I let my comment cut right to his insecurities. If I were the kind of guy who wanted to break him, I'd just keep bothering about it, but I love Chico, so I don't. And I remind myself to lay off him a little. He launches a fat tortilla crumb back my way, and it lands in my hair. I shake it loose as Mama's cell phone rings again in the next room. We hear her answer, and then her voice goes from calm to frantic. Lucia, come on, I'll call Donna Agustina, but you just stay calm. You need to stay calm. I'll be there in a few minutes. It'll be okay, I promise. Chico looks at me. His left eye still red and teary. His finger mid-flick is where he creeps onto his face. What happened? He whispers. I go to the open arch that separates our small kitchen from our only slightly larger living room, crowded with the oversized red velvet couches Mama got for a good price before I was born. Mama was proud she haggled the guy for an hour, asking him, who wants to sit on velvet in 100-degree humid weather? Turns out, Mama did, because she thought those couches looked like they belonged to royalty, and she prized them, even if it meant we had to get up every 5 minutes to cool off. Mama is pacing by our older-than-dirt television, cell phone pressed to her ear. What's going on? Everything okay? I ask. I brace myself for the news that someone has died or been killed or kidnapped. El bebé, Bolga, el bebé is coming, she says. A big smile spreads across her face and her eyes go wide with happiness, erasing the worry for a moment. Before I can ask any more questions, she's on another call, explaining to Donna Agustina that my cousin Pequeña has gone into labor at home and that Tia Lucia can't move her or get her to the hospital and to please hurry over there. Pequeña is 17. 2 years older than me, and she's my cousin, but not by blood. Just like Tia Lucia is my aunt, but not by blood. And Chico is my brother, but not by blood. Blood doesn't matter to us unless it's spilling. We're family, there for each other no matter what. And so a moment later, Mama is shouting at us to lock up the house over the sound of her motor scooter starting up and zooming out of the front patio as she rushes to Tia Lucia and Pequeña. Come on, Chico yells as he pushes past me in the kitchen. Chico's been dying to meet Pequeña's baby, constantly staring at her belly and asking how she feels whenever we're all together. At first, I thought this was just Chico being his usual self, someone who worries about others, who thinks babies and puppies and kittens are cute. But then, one night in our room, not too long after we found out Pequeña was pregnant, he told me about how he believes we come back to Earth after we die, that we're reborn and find our way back to those we left behind. And I realized then that Chico believes a part of his mamita is coming back to him. Maybe he thinks that when he finally sees Pequeña's baby, he'll recognize in some bit of his mother and see her once more. Mama and I don't really believe in that stuff, but who knows? Maybe Chico's right. I grab my key and lock up. I run in the direction of Tia Lucia's house, following the dust of Mama's scooter through the streets of our barrio, and catch up with Chico easily because I'm small and a fast runner. A good thing around here. We're about halfway there when Chico remembers he's no Olympian and slows down to a jog. Then to a walk. Damn, he says. leaning over and holding his stomach. I can't breathe. Let's just walk. This needs to take time anyway, right? I figure he has a point, and we slow down. He takes huffs on his thick, humid air, and his face is flushed a deep, burnt orange. Man, why'd Pequena wait so long anyway, he says. I mean, shouldn't she be having the baby in a hospital? You think this is safe? Her having the baby at home like this? Like we're in the dark ages or something? You think she'll be okay? He wipes tiny drops and streaks of sweat from his hairline and squints against the bright white of the burning sun. Yeah, of course she'll be all right. Women have babies every day, right? And you know Pequena, man. No little baby is going to take her out. I laugh, hoping to convince Chico, but he just shrugs. I can tell his worry is starting to eat away at him. He's getting nervous, like he always does, especially when it has to do with Pequena or me or our mothers. Like, he worries if Mama is late coming home from work, even if it's just a few minutes, because she might get caught in the dark. No one wants to get caught in the dark around here. And then there was the time Tia Lucia was getting threatening phone calls for a week straight demanding money. Chico's gut gushed and creaked and moaned with worry like it was eating him up inside until the calls suddenly stopped. Even though Mama and Tia said they'd heard of those kinds of calls happening to others too. Just small-time criminals pretending to be the really bad guys to see if they could extort some easy money. If someone doesn't take the bait, they just move on. I gotta admit, even I was a little freaked out by it, and I could tell it made Tia Lucia a little on edge too. That's another thing about life around here. You can never be completely sure what's a real threat and what's fake. It's wild, you know, Chico said next to me now. Pequena having a baby. I pick up a rock from the road and pitch it as far as I can, watching it land and send up a little puff of dust. Yeah, it's wild, and of course Pequena should be having her baby in a hospital. Of course she shouldn't have waited so long so that she got to the point where she couldn't walk or move, and Tia Lucia was in a panic calling on Jesus, Mary, Joseph, and Mama to help her. Up ahead, I see Donna Augustina hurrying to Tia's house, and I feel a little bit better since the old woman was a midwife when she was younger. Maybe everything will be okay, and Pequena will be okay, even if Pequena hasn't seemed okay for months. The truth is, Pequena probably waited too long because she didn't want anything to do with this baby. She refused to acknowledge its existence. She didn't talk about it or prepare for it. And I think a part of Pequena probably thought she could make it go away if she ignored it. It made me feel sorry for her than ever before, more than when her father left, more than when he never came back. I don't think she was ever going to tell Tia Lucia or Mama or Chico or me about the pregnancy. And I wonder if we hadn't accidentally found out what Pequena would have done when this day finally came. Would she have had the baby secretly in her room one night, emerged with it the next morning, carrying it in one arm, still refusing to acknowledge it, ignoring all the questions that would be asked? The only reason we found out she was pregnant was because months ago, Pequena fell from the white bus that takes us back and forth from the open market in the center of town and ended up bruised, bloodied, and broken at the town clinic. Mama and I got there in time to hear Pequena trying to explain to the doctor what had happened. She mumbled that it had been too hot and crowded, that she'd gotten dizzy and lost her grip as someone shoved into her. That's all, she insisted. That's how she slipped out of the open bus and onto all those rocks just as the bus had begun to descend from the highest hill in our barrio. The doctor explained to Tia and us that sometimes these things happen, that pregnant women had dizzy spells like this all the time, especially in crowded spaces, but not to worry because the baby was fine. He said this casually as he was setting Pequena's broken arm and tending to her wounds. Tia and Mama gasped and Pequena stared at the ceiling. Un bébé? Tia whispered. And then the room was silent, except for the gasping of an old man in the next room and a woman moaning somewhere out in the hall, where more patients were lined up, waiting to see the doctor. 5 months? Tia kept saying later that day, as she and Mama sat drinking coffee in our kitchen together. Pero como? Under the same roof? I don't understand. Who's the father? Mama patted Tia's hand and reassured her, reminded her that they were not old-fashioned viejas, and who cared who the father was. It must have been un amor que la fue mal, Lucia. A love that went so bad it just made her want to forget about the guy. Don't ask her about it. Let her come to you when she's ready. Hey, pobrecita, Mama said. Poor Pequena, let's focus on the baby instead. We'll raise it together. Mama added that Chico and I would be proper tios, and she and Tia Lucia would both be this baby's abuelas. And the baby would want for nothing. On and on she went, until what at first seemed like a disaster to Tia Lucia finally gave way to joy. Through it all, Pequena never said a word. Before long, Mama and Tia Lucia, best friends since they were niñitas, smiled over the tiny baby clothes they bought. They refurbished an old bassinet. They couldn't stop talking about how this baby was nothing but a blessing. But their joy was not contagious. It did not spread to Pequena, who refused to join Tia Lucia and Mama's discussion or contribute even a single name to the long list of possibilities Mama and Tia Lucia came up with. As the months passed, if it weren't for Pequena's huge belly that made her nickname laughable, you would swear there was no baby on the way. She did not acknowledge the existence of the cravings or the heartburn or the sickness that Mama and Tia Lucia insisted she must be feeling. Pequena did not once wince at the weight she carried or her thickened feet. It was only as another baby conversation between Tia and Mama trickled out of the kitchen window one day to the patio where Pequena and I sat that I finally saw in her something like acknowledgement. "We are so small, Bulga," she said to me. "This world wants us to be small forever. We don't matter to this world." She hunched forward, and for a moment I thought she was going to fall. "No, we're okay, Pequena, and everything will be okay. You'll see," I told her, nudging her shoulder and offering her a drink of my Coca-Cola. She sat with the arm she'd broken, now skinny and pale, propped on her belly, and stared toward the street. Her eyes were dull and far away, and a sense of resigned doom settled around her. All the assurances I'd given her seemed like empty lies. "What does your name mean?" she asked me suddenly. I stared down at the soda in my hand, the red and white logo of the bottle. She knew it meant flea. Everyone did. And Pequena knew the story behind it just as I knew the story behind hers. "We're small people," Pequena said again, "with small names meant to live small lives." She looked like she was in a trance. "That's all we're allowed to live. That's all the world wants us to live. But sometimes even that it won't give us. Instead, the world wants to crush us." I wanted to tell her she was wrong. I wanted to tell her of course we mattered. But the thing is, the way Pequena was talking, I don't even think she would have heard me. "I can't believe I have to bring Kid into this," she whispered. It was the only time I'd heard her acknowledge the baby. And it struck me then how tragic this baby was for Pequena. How much she didn't want it because of what it would be born into. "It'll be okay," I mumbled. She laughed. "What do you know?" she said. I looked at her with her bloated belly. I felt embarrassed and stupid. She looked at me, her gaze softened. "Hey, Bulga, you have to get out of here one day. You know that, right?" I shrugged. "We all need to get out of here. But actually leaving, that's hard." She looked down at her belly. "I waited too long," she whispered. "Now it's too late. For this baby and for me." And for the first time, I wondered if she really fell out of that bus. All right, we're going to pause here because we have a lot to talk about just within this first piece. So the first thing that I definitely want to talk about is the characters that we're introduced to. So when we think about the person who is actually telling this story, or the person that's starting telling this story, it is Pulga. I want to make sure I spell the name right. Hold on. Yep. Okay. So we have Pulga. So at this point, Pulga is our narrator. And whenever we think about how Pulga is indirectly characterized, I want you to kind of think about what you learn about this person from their words, from their actions, and from their thoughts. So I'll get us started here. The first thing is that I noticed that this kid is not only a leader, but he is a thinker. So I know that he's a leader because he kind of picks on his friend a little bit. And I also know that when I say he's a leader, I mean that I feel like he's the one that Chico kind of looks up to. Even though we know very little about both boys at this point, we do know that Bulga seems to be the one who's more confident. Also that he's a thinker because he's very reflective. You know, he thinks about not just his mom, but he thinks about Chico and how he knows that Chico isn't very confident. He also has some interesting thoughts about Pequena. And one thing that she asks him that I want you to focus on is I want you to think about the importance of names in this book. I want you to think about names and what do they mean. I want you to think about your own name and what your own name might mean and if it is fitting according to you or not. So we also have some other characters that we are introduced to. We know that we have Mama, And we know that we have Chico. We know that we have Pequeña. And we also have Pequeña's mom. And I want to make sure, again, that I'm spelling her name right. I think it's Lucia. Okay. So some other topics that kind of emerge in here as we are reading, we also see, once again, we see colors, we see escape, but we're introduced to something new. Actually, two new things: blood and family. So I want you to take a second. I want you to really think about these things, these colors, the escape, the blood, and the family, and really what kind of ideas or what kind of reflections, what kind of meaning is already being built about these things before we move on to our next portion.